Hey, how you doing, econ students? This is Mr. Clifford. Welcome to the Microeconomics live stream. This is it, your last chance, and most importantly, this is your last AP test for a lot of you. So if you're a senior, class 2017, you're almost done, man. You're right there. This is it. So really quickly, so we know, do me a favor, leave a comment on the live chat telling me that we are good audio-wise, so you guys can hear me. And we're going to go from there. Once I get that message in, letting you know, by the way, I'm looking at the live chat right now. These questions are coming in. That's good stuff. But we're going to be doing most of this stuff on Twitter. And if you don't have a Twitter, I'm sorry. But the reason why is a couple reasons. One, it really worked well with the macro review session that we did. We were able to get rid of people who leave horrible, stupid things on the live chat. And most importantly, I can read it on Twitter. This thing is zooming by super fast. And there's this lag. So, you're, 30 seconds behind me. And so you ask me questions, it might be something I already covered. So Twitter is what we're going to do. Please follow me on Twitter at ACDC Leadership. We're up and running, guys. So we all say we're good for the audio. So, all right, let's move on. All right, so I read through some of the comments people were leaving on the chat. Let's face it, okay? Some of you guys do macroeconomics, and you're a little scared, right? And I can tell that by the comments. Some people are like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do this. They're freaking out. Whew. First thing, get used to this feeling. You're going to do this in college. Remember, you're going to take hard classes in college, and you should take hard classes in college. That's the point of going to college. So this is going to happen in your life. All right, let's get over that. Now, let's get the job done, right? So review with me right now. Go back and watch any summary videos that you need to. As we're talking, pinpoint the things that you don't know. Okay, I'm not going to cover that graph. I got to go back and look at that concept or that skill. And my videos have all the stuff you need, obviously. If you haven't done so, take a look I made a 30-minute long video that covers all of microeconomics. It covers the entire course in like 28 minutes. It's intense. There's a lot of stuff in there, but it's a good thing to watch right before you go on the test to kind of get all the concepts back in your brain. The most important thing is the graph. I saw someone ask a question. It was a great question. They said, where should I focus? Like, should I do the micro? Should I focus on the multiple choice or the free response? Well, I leave it up to you. It depends on what you're good at, what you're not good at. But for me, the free response graphs are the easiest place to get points, and they're also the easiest place to lose points. In other words, if you don't know how to draw a monopoly and they ask you about a monopoly, like, you're done. Like, there's so, they're going to have a hard time with that. So make sure you can draw the key graphs. There's two main key graphs that they ask, and it's usually between the two in the first response. Either it's a monopoly graph or a side-by-side graph showing perfect competition, right? Side-by-side graph. So make sure you can do each one of those things. And of course, there's a bunch of other graphs as well. In fact, there's a total, I think, about 8 graphs you have to do, but different variations. A monopoly with profit or loss, and perfect competition with profit, loss, or break even. By the way, if in about 30 minutes you totally get this stuff, you everything I'm talking about, you're like, I get it. Stop watching this video. This video is good. It's a great way to get a quick summary and maybe get some of your questions answered. But in about, like I said, 30 minutes, if you're like, oh, yeah, I know this, go do practice questions. Practice questions are the best way to review. If you sit down, grab a multiple choice questions, try your best and see how you do, because there's a difference between me telling you that at concepts and you going, oh yeah, I get it when he says it, and you proving you get it on a multiple choice. So if you don't already have the ultimate review packet, a shameful plug, I know, go get it. There's 2 full practice micro tests in there. So try them, see how you do. If your teacher gave you a practice test, at some point sit down, do a few of those multiple choice questions tonight. Do at least 20 of them just to see if you're getting it at the level you need. Okay? So that being said, I was stalling a little bit to get people all showed up to the stream. We are going strong. We got about 1,000 people almost up and running on this thing, which is awesome. So thank you so much for showing up today. We are here. All right. Again, we are on Twitter right now. I'll let you know that I'm accepting questions only on Twitter. So if you're leaving stuff in the live chat, that's awesome, but I'm not going to be reading those much. Do me a favor, shout out to Mr. Smith. Let's just get it done. Get it done. So, all right, streaming is up and running. Here we go. I'm getting questions coming in. Somebody asked about showing a monopoly with the regulation, right? Socially optimal fair return. I add that on my list. So I'm making a list right now of the things you guys are going to ask, and then we'll start jumping onto it. Can you please go over margin utility? Margin utility. I can. And so let me tell you something real quick. Before I keep looking at these tweets, there are basically 8 key graphs, all right? So let's make sure we know what they are first, all right? So if you're making a list in your brain, make sure you got it. Monopoly, perfect competition, most important ones. Monopolistic competition, right? Perfect competition, resource market, so hiring workers. So there's 2 types of perfect competition, right? There's producing stuff, right, with the marginal cost, and then there's hiring workers, which is MRP and MRC, right? Then you got to know the idea of game theory matrix. I'm going to put that under graphs, even though it's not really a graph. And there's a positive and a negative externality. So if you add that all up, there's 7 or 8 key graphs that you absolutely have to know. There's also super important is there are 4 key skills that you see over and over again on the AP test. So make sure you have these skills. Let's go back to game theory. Game theory, doing dominant strategy on game theory, finding out, if they have a dominant strategy or not, and something called a Nash equilibrium. So make sure you can do that. Also, the skill of hiring workers. So calculating the MRP and the MRC of a worker for each worker and deciding how many workers you should hire. You also have to be able to produce products. So I give you the total cost. You have to calculate the marginal cost and decide how many units you should produce. And remember, these are all skills, not graphs. These are skills. Last one is the one that person just asked about. They said, what about utility? How do you do this whole thing, with utility? And that's a great question. They basically give you a question with the margin utility for some individual for 2 different products, and they have 2 different prices, and you have to calculate the margin utility per dollar. We're going to jump on it towards the end for sure. Right now, again, I'm getting your questions on Twitter. Someone said lump sum per unit. We will do that for sure. Lump sum. There's 2 types of taxes. There's 2 types of subsidy. There's a lump sum and there's a per unit. I'll just tell you right now so we all agree. A lump sum, here's the rule. A lump sum tax does not affect quantity, right? At least in the short run. A lump sum, so if you see a question and it says a lump sum tax, what happens to quantity? Nothing. A lump sum tax only affects fixed costs. And the reason why a lump sum tax is a one-time tax. So the government taxes them $100, a one-time thing. That doesn't affect the marginal cost. It only affects fixed cost. So the quantity where MR equals MC doesn't change. So if you're just going to learn rules, and we're at the point where you're just memorize it, get it, fixed costs change when there's a change in lump sum taxes, quantity doesn't change. So lump sum is a lump, it doesn't move, quantity stays the same. Per unit tax definitely causes marginal cost to shift, in this case up or to the left, and so quantity will change. So with the tax, quantity will fall. If it's a per unit tax, lump sum doesn't change the quantity. So I think we covered that well enough. If you want more, let me know. Also, please cover the resource market. I will for sure. MRP, MRC, that graph. In fact, we're going to do all those key graphs. JD Thompson asked, what about the monopsony graph? Should we know that and what that looks like? Maybe the minimum wage effects on that. They have asked monopsony on a free response. It's been done, but it's mostly done in multiple choice questions. You have to decide and use economics. You have to look at the marginal benefit and the marginal cost. If you're trying to get a 5 or a super high 4, go back and study a monopsony. It's the little tiny details that you're trying to get now to get a 5. If you're trying to get a 3, do not go back and look at monopolies or monopsonies. Don't go back and I'm going to figure out these little tiny concepts. Focus on the big ideas. Do those practice multiple choice questions. Watch the summary video. Go, okay, what are the big chunk stuff that I absolutely have to know? Because that's what you want. You want the easy questions right. Get the easy questions right. It was a good question that he asked about monopsonies. I'm not going to cover it. I did make a video about it. Take a look at the video. I will talk about elasticity, though. That's a pretty important concept. From Joseph. Tax incidents. These are, oh man, you guys got some great questions. You know what? You guys are all asking the good stuff, the stuff that's the tricky stuff. We were going to go over predictive free responses. In fact, let's do that really quick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what my predictions were for this year. They're right here. I think this year you're going to start off with them. Now, by the way, I don't know. I have no clue. But here's my predictions. This is what I think based on past tests. I think you're going to have a monopoly graph showing the elastic and inelastic range. We're going to cover all these concepts, by the way, today. So going into price discrimination, they might ask one question about it, but it won't be the focus of the entire question. Second question I think is going to be about taxes. They're going to ask you, here's a graph. Where's the tax box or the revenue goes to the government? Where's the consumer surplus, producer surplus? Maybe a question about elasticity and maybe even externality in there. And the last one, I think they're going to do hiring workers. I think they're going to see a good question about, either the chart, remember the skill, the chart, hiring workers, here's the quantity, here's their output, how many workers do you hire, or the graph of MRP and MRC. there's my predictions. Am I right? I don't know. We'll have to see, but I'm not sure. Again, if you're just joining us, we are doing the questions and things you want to see on Twitter. Thank you so much. Somebody sent me a picture. Thank you for that picture. I look horrible on the screen, but that's okay. I look like a crazy person. I am going to go over dead weight loss in general. We'll do that when we talk about monopolies. But you're going to see dead weight loss a lot. Dead weight loss is a concept that's reoccurring because it's about efficiency, right? And microeconomics is about efficient use of our resources. You see dead weight loss with monopolies. You see it with positive and negative externalities, and you see it with ceilings and floors. So get used to this idea of dead weight loss. It's when we're not producing the quantity socially optimal. We're not making the amount society actually wants. Dara said she's so nervous about these graphs. You know what? I bet you if you're nervous, if you're like, oh man, I don't know about these graphs, you're probably a student who took macroeconomics, and macro only had 5 graphs, and then you're looking at a bunch of these other graphs in micro. Just take a breath, man. We're going to cover it, okay? We're going to go over it. You've got some good resources to help you out. But don't think for a second that when I put a graph and I draw it on my board, right? I got a board, I'm going to draw some of these graphs, that you can do it because you watch me do it, right? You've got to practice. So take out a blank piece of paper. We're going to start up some graphing in a second. I'm looking more at your questions on Twitter. Do me a favor, please follow me if you don't already so. And also, please subscribe on YouTube. Monopolistic competition. I will cover that graph. You guys are asking great questions here. Thank you so much, Michael. Excess capacity, Michael, is what asking about. Probably not going to be on the test, excess capacity. That's, again, the detail stuff. But the concept is we're producing less than productively efficient. If that didn't make sense, don't freak out. You'll be fine. All right. I think I got enough questions for this. Somebody asked taxes, please, from Caitlin. Talking about the grind. Somebody said monopsonies. Take a look at my other videos for monopsonies. If at the very end I have time, I'm going to jump onto it. Great questions. First of all, thank you guys for watching my videos, and thank you for all these tweets. Let's jump into it, okay? Let's jump into it. First thing we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is a monopoly practice. I'm going to give you what I think are fair responses, so let's practice that first, and here we go. This is a monopoly graph. They could ask all sorts of questions. So I want you to think of the kind of questions you might see, all right? And then we'll start going over these. They could ask things like, where's price and quantity unregulated? But that's not it. They could say price and quantity socially optimal, price and quantity at fair return, right? Where's quantity, what quantity is where total revenue is maximized? Identify the box of profit, identify the box of total cost, total revenue. They could ask all these great questions from this one fair response. Now, it's super important. Maybe you don't know all the concepts I said, right? But you need to feel comfortable with this graph, the general idea of what you're looking at. The marginal cost and the ATC look the same for all firms, right? So it's perfect competition or monopoly or monopoly competition. The MC and the ATC are always the same. So don't freak out about that. The thing that's different than perfect competition here is this downward sloping demand curve. A monopoly can sell another unit if it wants to, but it's got to lower the price if it expects people to buy more. So that's why the MR is less than the demand curve. All right, here we go. I'm going to ask some questions. I'm being serious. I want you to treat this like Dora the Explorer. I want you to say it to the screen. So I'm going to ask you a question. You say it to the screen, and I'll give you a little pause so you can do this, okay? Look, Boots, where is... Like, you've seen Dora the Explorer, right? And she hangs out with Boots, and she asks questions and whatever. Okay, back to this. All right, first question. What is the quantity and price for an unregulated monopoly? All right. Quantity would be Q1. That's where MR hits MC, right? Q1. The price is all the way up to demand at P5. If you said P1, you're making a classic mistake. Don't do that. The price is up to what people want to pay for monopoly. So unregulated price and quantity is Q1 and P5. All right, new question. What is the socially optimal price and quantity? That is where the MC hits demand, right? So that's Q3, P3. Looks like P3. Right there at point T, if you see where point T is, that right there is where the marginal cost hits demand. That's a super important concept. Here's why. Q3 is the only quantity on that graph where there's no deadweight loss. Right? There's no deadweight loss at all. So the question is, where is deadweight loss for an unregulated monopoly, right? So if Q3, there'd be no deadweight loss, and Q1 is where an unregulated monopoly would produce, where's the deadweight loss? That's right, R RTV. RTV would be the area of deadweight loss. Deadweight loss is not always, I don't want to say always, but it's almost always a triangle for our class. So it's a triangle RTV. These are all the units we should have produced, but we didn't. And it makes sense. At this point, what's happening is the marginal cost is less than the demand. In other words, people are willing to pay, right, for these units, and they want more units. But the marginal cost to produce them is low, but the monopoly is not making them. Like the monopoly stops at Q1 because they don't want to produce more because Q1 maximizes their profit. All right, next question. What is the price and the quantity at fair return? At fair return. Okay, fair return is the idea that they are breaking even. They're making no economic profit. It is Q4, P2. Right, that's where the ATC hits demand. I want to point out really quick, somebody asked about regulation. That's it. There's unregulated, there's socially optimal, where the government can set a price ceiling at P3, and that would force them to produce quantity socially optimal. Or they can put a price ceiling at P2 and force them to produce with no profit, right? So unregulated, socially optimal, fair return, that's the idea of regulating a monopoly. Let's keep going. Right now, please figure out, for an unregulated monopoly, what is the consumer surplus? Consumer surplus, unregulated monopoly. Well, if the price is up there at P5, it's ZRP5. ZRP5 is a consumer surplus. By the way, are you guys saying this out loud? No, seriously, are you talking to a screen by yourself in your room or somewhere? Because if you are, that's awesome. Seriously, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, new question. Here we go. How about the consumer surplus at the socially optimal quantity? So if the government put in a price ceiling right there at P3, what is the consumer surplus? ZTP3. That's right. It's a bigger triangle. Notice, which makes sense, when the price is lower, if the government got this monopoly to lower the price, then they'd have to be more consumer surplus. Consumers would benefit from this regulation. Okay, makes sense. Now, new question. Again, if the quantity is Q3, where's the deadweight loss? Right? The quantity is Q3. What is the area of deadweight loss? There is none. Bam! There is no deadweight loss. Q3 is socially optimal, also called allocatively efficient. There's no deadweight loss at all, right? So, new question. Let's change it to something else. We know Q1 is where profit is maximized. Where is total revenue maximized? Total revenue is maximized at Q2. Where the MR hits 0, the total revenue is at a peak. Okay. In fact, let's go ahead and switch over and go back to me for a second. Let's make sure you understand that concept graphically on a graph. So we're going to head and show this really quick. We've got quantity and price for a monopoly, a downward sloping demand curve, and the marginal revenue. So you feel good and comfortable with that. You should also recognize there's another graph that's below it that shows the total revenue, right? So if the marginal revenue is positive, right, then the total revenue is going to be going up. When the marginal revenue goes negative, total revenue is going to be going down. So this actually starts at 0. It goes up like this. Then it hits a peak right here where MR hits 0 and goes down. In fact, it goes all the way down to here, but you get the idea. Now, notice this is not profit. This is not profit. This is total revenue. This is the total revenue this firm is earning, right? It looks like this. Now, they've never asked to draw this graph. Draw this one. That's a monopoly. But you should know the elastic and inelastic range, right? So if the AP test says, where's the elastic range and the inelastic range on this demand curve? Well, this side is the elastic range and the other side is the inelastic range. Remember, monopolies always produce in the elastic range because their marginal cost is positive. They'll never produce out here because they can just lower output and get more revenue. So again, one more time. This is what I think the first response is going to have. It's going to have the elastic and inelastic range and know the difference between the two. Does that make sense? Well, go back to the graph. So I want you to figure out what portion of the demand curve is in the elastic range. What portion of that demand curve is in the elastic range using letters on that demand curve, right? Well, it's got to be ZS, right? The section ZS represents the elastic range because that's where MR is positive. Elastic range. Does this make sense? I hope so, guys. I hope it makes sense. All right. The other questions they can ask, I'll give you another one really quick. What if there was a lump sum tax? This monopoly faces a lump sum tax. What's going to happen to the price and quantity in the short run, at least? So price and quantity for a monopoly with a lump sum tax. quantity doesn't change, right? The lump sum, quantity doesn't change, price doesn't change because the MC doesn't change. So the MR, the MC, they don't change. If those things don't change, then where MR hits MC doesn't change. So the price and quantity stay exactly the same with a lump sum tax. Now, new question. What if there is a per unit tax? Per unit tax, what happens to the price and the quantity for that monopoly? You got it? Per unit tax. Well, a tax shifts the marginal cost upward, if you think of it that way, or think of it supply would decrease. But now, right, where the marginal cost hits the MR would be a new spot, right? Because marginal cost would shift. The quantity would go down, the price would go up, which totally makes sense in a logical way. I mean, if there's a tax on a monopoly, what happens? Well, price goes up, right? Because they can't produce as much, and the quantity is going to go down. So taxing monopoly is not a good way of trying to make a monopoly more efficient. In fact, a per unit tax on this monopoly would make deadweight loss bigger, right? It would cause more deadweight loss because we'd be producing even less than Q3, right? Does it make sense? I hope it makes sense, guys. I know I'm covering some concepts pretty fast, and I'm assuming a lot of background knowledge. I'm not reteaching the concepts over again, but that's kind of what this video is about. It's about practicing, make sure you understand it. All right, so I'm going back over into Twitter, seeing what you got. Someone said lump sum. We got that. I am going to go over factor markets. In fact, you guys are going to draw it in a second. Economies and diseconomies of scale. I will add that to my list for sure. Economies of scale. Not a hard concept. Pretty easy. Maybe one multiple choice question. Which reminds me, it's a good time to keep in mind, if you haven't already done so, my website, acdcecon.com, has the breakdown of all the microeconomics free responses, and it shows you what they've asked in the past. You probably could take a look at that to see what they're most likely to ask. What you would see on that one is that economies of scale is not asked very often. So maybe it might be on a multiple choice as one part, but it's sure as heck not going to be an entire free response. At least I hope not. So keep that in mind. Like I said in the very beginning, you got to be strategic with how you use your time here. You got to use your time efficiently to figure out where to focus and where not to focus. All right. Can we please go over free response predictions? Yes, I did. I will talk about elasticity. A lot of elasticity questions. These are great questions. Let's see what else. Oligopoly graph, game theory, utility. First of all, thank you guys. Oh my gosh, there's so many of them. This is the best example of scarcity. All right, unlimited wants, limited resources. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm not ignoring, by the way. If you tweeted all these things out, I'm not ignoring them. I am looking at them. I promise, for sure. You guys are so funny. Okay, let's go jump in really quickly. We can talk about elasticity, but let's go back and talk about supply and demand, particularly with taxes. What I'm going to ask you to do is this, and we're going to go pretty quick here. So we're going to go fast. And don't pause the video, because if you do, then you won't be asking me questions in the same time, and we'll be off. So I want you to do your best on this one. Here's what I think the second free response is going to look like. I think they're going to give you a supply and demand graph, and they'll ask you all sorts of questions about consumer and producer surplus and about the tax itself and this kind of cool stuff. One of the things you got to watch out for that the test does is they'll ask a question like, let's say the equilibrium price is 5. So before the tax, price is 5. What if there was a price ceiling at 6? So the government puts a price ceiling at 6 and the current equilibrium price is 5. What happens to the quantity, the quantity at equilibrium? And the answer is nothing. Remember, if you see the words floor or ceiling on the test, before you answer anything, think, okay, is it binding? Does it have an effect? Remember, a ceiling at 6 would not have an effect because ceilings don't go above equilibrium. They're supposed to go below equilibrium if they're going to have an effect on the market. So super important. Just keep in mind, you see ceilings and floors, be careful. They had tried to do a trick question a couple of years ago, throwing that idea and trying to mess students up, putting a floor in the wrong spot. So floors don't go below. Ceilings don't go above, right? To have an effect, floors have to go above, ceilings have to go below equilibrium. So back to this question. Consumer surplus before the tax, total expenditures before the tax. The first thing I need you to do when you're doing these questions, you've got to be able to calculate consumer surplus. They've asked this before. They also have asked you to shade it in. So knowing where it is important, but being able to calculate it is pretty important as well. It's the area of a triangle. So in this case, it's $8, right, which is up there, at 0 quantity demanded, People wouldn't pay $8. And the price they did pay was $5, right? So that's $3 times 90, right? Which is 270. And you got to cut that in half. So that the answer to that one is 135. So question number one, the consumer surplus before the tax is 135. Again, the way I got it was 8 minus 5, which is 3. 3 times 90 is 270. 270 cut in half. So we got a rectangle, then cut it in half, area of a triangle. All right, I'm not going to do more consumer surplus calculations because they're not important. I am, however, going to jump into some of these other questions. Tax expenditures before the tax. Total expenditures. How much do people spend on whatever this product is before the tax, where supply equals demand? Well, they spent $5 on 90 units. 5 times 90 is $450. So the answer number 2 is $450 is the total expenditures that people spent. It's also $450 that producers received, right? There was no tax in between, right? So in the beginning, before the tax, there is no tax revenue that goes to the government. In number 4, the tax revenue that goes to the government, well, here we go. When you see a tax question, keep in mind the amount of the tax is not the change in the price. In other words, the price went from 5 up to 6. Yes, that's true. Price went up from 5 to 6. But the vertical distance between the supply curves is the amount of the tax per unit. So the total tax revenue the government gets, we have to multiply how much the tax is for each 1 unit times the quantity. Now, the quantity is easy. The quantity is 60. Why? Because when supply shifts to the left, right, the new quantity is 60. So we know that. The question is, how much is the tax? Well, it's not a $1 tax. It's a $2 tax. Because look at the vertical distance, right? Vertical distance from 2 to 4 or from 4 to 6. The vertical distance is the amount of the tax per unit, which makes sense because each unit costs $2 more. So the whole supply curve shifts up $2. And by up, I mean vertically, right? In real life, supply has now decreased, but you get the idea. So what's the point? The point is $2 times 60 is $120 of the tax revenue that goes to the government. Now, of that tax, how much is paid by consumers? Of that $120, well, consumers they used to pay $5, and now they pay $6. So they pay $1 more than before, and they bought 60 units. So it's $60 of the tax is consumers paid. Now, if you, for number 5, put $1, that's right too. If you said per unit. Real quick, I want to point out, if you're like, what is he asking? This is a super vague question. Like for question 5, the amount of the tax paid by consumers could be the total amount or the per unit amount. Does that make sense? So, obviously I don't have too much room to write here. So the answer, if you got the right answer, which was 1, that's technically right. I was looking more for 1 times the quantity, so 60. And number 6, tax paid by producers, that's also 60. So they share the tax equally. And there we jump into the tax incidence. Tax incidence shows who pays for a tax. So if the demand is steeper, right? If the demand is super steep or super flat, that changes who ends up paying for a tax. In this case, both the elasticities of this graph are the same, right? They're the same elasticity. They're either elastic or inelastic, and they're the same. So they actually share the tax equally. But if you have one that's more inelastic than the other, that changes who pays the tax. It makes more sense if you graph it. Once you graph it, I think it makes the most sense. In fact, let me do it on this real quick. What I'm doing right now is I am going to draw a tax with the demand super inelastic. So let's make the demand super inelastic visually, and so you can spot who pays more of the tax. And this is the idea of what's called tax incidence. Who ends up paying more for that tax? So I got a price, I got a quantity. I'm going to have a downward sloping demand curve, but I'm making it super inelastic. I'm going to make the supply relatively elastic, right? So a trick of the test, if you're like, okay, you see a question that says the demand is super inelastic and the tax and the supply is more elastic, who's going to pay more for the tax? You don't have to memorize that. Just draw the graph, right? Draw the graph with a tax, and that should show you, at least visually, what you're going for. Now, I'm going a little quick here. I don't have a quantity. Now I do, and here's the price, and here's that tax. So it should say tax here. You guys with me? You with me? All right, now the new price is here, down, right? So this is the new quantity 1, and the new price is over here. Now, if you're confused, you're like, what's going on? right there in front of you. Do you see it? Who's paying a portion of that tax box? You should see a box. And if you don't see the box, not the end of the world. You'll be fine. But there is a box right in front of you. And the way to find it is you start at the new equilibrium, right? And you go down to the old supply curve, right? There you go. See it? Kind of, right? So you go down the old supply curve and over, and that shows you what's called the tax revenue box. That is the tax revenue box that the government gets to keep. And the reason why is that's the tax per unit, right? That vertical distance, that new quantity is the quantity. That's how much the government gets to keep of this revenue people spent on whatever product this is. Now, just the way I drew it, you can be able to tell who pays more of the tax. You can see that consumers ended up paying more of this tax. And I'm going to shade this in red. This top portion, this red portion, is what consumers paid in higher prices for this tax. The bottom portion of this green box is how much producers paid of this tax. So right there, kind of ugly, I know, is what producers pay the tax. So who paid more of the tax? Consumers. That's right. When, here's the rule, demand is inelastic. More inelastic than the supply, consumers pay more of the tax. And then once you have one, it's like the opposite, like go the other direction. If supply is more elastic, if supply is more inelastic, I got lost. If the demand is more elastic than the supply, then producers pay more of the tax. Did you get that? I'll say it again. Now, if the demand is more elastic, so if you had this demand curve super flat, right? So if I took the same demand curve, do the same graph over again, put that demand curve and tilted it down like that, then the box would look different and producers would be paying more of that tax. Does that make sense at all? I got a whole video about it, right? If you haven't seen it, the tax question, and I asked you a bunch of tax questions as well. But this is the sort of thing that I think you're going to see on our actual test. So I think this will be question 2, something like this. Total expenditures after tax, question number 7. It's 6 times 60, so 360. 8 total revenue, firms after the tax, so it's called the net revenue of the firms, is 4 times 60, that's 240. And the deadweight loss is an area, if in this case, let's go ahead and just shade it in. Deadweight loss, right? If we're not supposed to tax this and there's no negative externalities, this area right here is this area of deadweight loss, okay? Does that make any sense? Listen, I hope I'm not going too advanced and like losing half you guys. And you're like, oh man, I totally don't remember that stuff. I'm just trying to cover what I think is going to be on the free responses. We're going to go back and draw the other key graphs. In fact, let's go do that right now. Yeah, for sure. Did you not have that question up? Did I take that question off the entire time? I hope not. Sorry, guys, if I did. Anyways, this is the question that I was just showing you. Now, you didn't really need the question for half the stuff I just said, but there's the question again in case you want to take a look at it later on. Okay? All right, here we go. So let's keep going into this stuff. What we got to do now is time to do some graphing. You do the graphing, okay? So you got a blank piece of paper out in front of you. There are key graphs you absolutely need to know, and there's some, they're so important. They're just so important. You got to do it. Let's start with perfect competition. Right now, I want side-by-side graphs for a perfect competitive product market, right? Selling a product, perfect competitive product market, right? And I want you to draw the market and the firm with the firm making profit. I'll say it again. Perfect competition, product market with the firm making profit, all right? Good luck. Alvaro, we just went over taxes for you. You're all good? So people who just joined us, we're drawing a firm in a market in perfect competition, product market. So selling stuff, not hiring workers. All right, you guys got it? Now, like I said before, they actually asked this question on the AP test a couple years in a row, actually. So get used to seeing this. But I don't think it's going to be on the test this year. I think it's going to be a Monopoly question. I mean, we'll see. But they could ask it a third time. But I think it's time for a Monopoly. It could be Monopoly competition. But if they did ask it, you know it. And you need the graph for the multiple choice section. First, you know the market graph. That's just supply and demand. Now, if this is all you had, that's a problem. Make sure to label ... down. Always. If you ever draw a graph, right, ... down, and give me some sort of quantity. Don't make any numbers up. And we'll go ... over, and we'll do PM for the price at a market. So that's the graph I wanted you to do for the market graph. Now the firm graph, if you watched my other review session that we did, the other live stream, I told you a trick a couple years ago. I want to say, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago. Because I graded the free responses, the kids had to have ... over to get this other point. You had to go dot across. So I had a horizontal demand equals the marginal revenue, or Mr. DARP. Looks just like that. So you have to feel comfortable with this concept. This is the price for the firm. So make sure next time you draw this, ... over, because they are a price taker, right? This firm, perfect competitive firm that's price taking. Now, the next step, you already know this. Marginal cost and ATC always look the same, always. Marginal cost goes down and up, looks just like that. ATC is going to go down, hit a minimum, and then go up. But you've got to draw it at the right spot, right? If you end up drawing this in the wrong spot, you end up not with what I wanted. What I wanted was a profit, right? So if you want profit, you got to make sure ATC goes in the exact right spot. In this case, it's going to go below that horizontal demand curve, right? Below that horizontal demand curve. But you're not done. You got to finish off with a quantity. Where's that quantity? Well, all firms produce where MR hits MC. So that is right there, ... down. And there's a quantity for the firm. Okay, not the prettiest graph in the world, but there it is. The AP test might ask you, of course, shade in the box of profit. One year they ask you to shade in the total costs, but you should be able to shade in that box of profit. So do it right now. Shade in that box of profit, showing you understand exactly where it is. All right, there you go. Firm, maximizing profit, perfect competition. Market and the firm, all right? Now, is that the short run or the long run? Well, that's the short run. They're making profit. Other firms are going to enter, right? When firms enter, that changes this graph. So, super fast. First of all, I hope you guys got that. You guys got that? How you feeling? You feeling good? I know some of you guys are like freaking out. Oh my gosh, this is so hard. It's not that complicated. I mean, the concepts make sense. I mean, think about it. That's the graph of supply and demand you've done, even in your macroeconomics class. This firm's a price taker. It has to take this price. So let's just call this price $10. The marginal revenue is equal to the price, right? If they sell another unit for $10, then the marginal revenue is 10. Sell another unit for another $10, marginal revenue is 10. So the logic makes sense. This is the demand. People want to pay $10 from this firm, right? Because they have to take the price set by the market. If they raise the price to 15, no one's going to buy from them because there's thousands of other firms, right? So that's the first thing to understand, horizontal demand. And the MC and ATC always look the same, right? Marginal cost, ATC. You always produce, if you follow the rules, MR equals MC, boom, you got it, right? You got this stuff. You can do it. Keep your head high, huh? Come on, right? We got what? Geez, what? 12 hours for some of you guys before you take this test? Here's my question now. Let's finish this off. In the long run, what happens to price and quantity? I think I did this during my other live stream, so I'm going to switch to other things in a second. In the long run, because this is the short run, what's going to happen to the price and quantity in the market, price and quantity for the firm, okay? Go ahead and draw it on yours. Let's see how you do. Take that price. Do it. Shout out to Kendall James. All right. Annie. Oh, somebody says too easy. Hit me with a challenge. Okay, okay. We'll start with the easy stuff first. All right. So there's profit being made. What are firms going to do? Well, other firms going to enter because it's perfect competition. So what's going to happen? Well, the supply is going to increase. So we'll draw this in green. Supply is going to increase. Price will go down, quantity go up. If they ask you to draw and label it, you do some more labeling here. I'm not, because I don't want things to get too ugly. But this firm's going to take that new price. Bam, 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 bam. That new price has to go right through here, because if it was any lower, they'd be making a loss. If it was any higher, they'd be making a profit. That new demand equals the marginal revenue means they're not going to produce that old quantity at QF anymore. Right? They're going to produce here, right? Because that's where the MR hits MC, and let's say QF1. So the answer on the very bottom, price goes down, quantity goes up for the market. Price goes down, quantity goes down for the individual firm. Does it make sense? Now, question, how can each firm be producing less, right? That's what the graph says, but there's more quantity in the market, right? That's a good question. Each firm's making less. That's what it says. This firm's making less than before, but there's more total output in the market. Well, there's more firms, right? Firms entered. This is the idea of the long run. The end graph means they're making no economic profit. They're breaking even. That's the idea of what's called perfect competition The product market, we just did short run to long run. Now, how'd you feel if that was on the test? Like if that was the question, and they've done it in the past. They say, okay, draw perfect competition, side-by-side graphs, show profit, then what's going to happen in the long run? They've done that several times in the past. How would you feel if they asked that question? Would you feel more comfortable with that, or would you feel more comfortable, with something else like this monopoly? Would you feel more comfortable with this instead, where they asked you, okay, here's a monopoly, where's the price, quantity, consumer surplus, quantity, socially optimal, or would you feel more comfortable if they asked you draw a monopoly? That's what you're going to see. Like a 95% chance you're going to see one of those three things. Here's a monopoly, where's price and quantity and stuff on it, right? Draw a monopoly, and here's perfect competition, side-by-side graphs. The only other little thing they might ask, the 5%er thing they might ask, is two things. Last year they asked like a supply and demand question, ceilings and floors. So that's a possibility, maybe. Or monopolistic competition, right? Monopolist competition, usually in the long run. So really quick, let's just bat that one out of the park. Super fast. Draw monopolist competition in long run equilibrium. Monopolist competition in long run equilibrium on your graph, okay? So you've got demand, marginal revenue, marginal cost. Give me a price and quantity. So dot, dot, dot down, dot, dot, dot over. So take a look. That's it. Demand, marginal revenue, marginal cost. But we're not done. We have to add an ATC. Monopolist competition. It's like a monopoly that firms can enter, right? So that means they're not going to make profit in the long run. Now be careful here. You can't have the ATC down here. It's got to start up here. It's going to go tangent to this spot, nowhere else. Back down the MC and then back up. That is the ATC. I tell my students that is a sweet spot, right? I'm drawing a little arrow. That right there, ladies and gentlemen, is monopolist competition in the long run. Now, do me a favor, on that graph, label the dead weight loss. What? Shade in that area dead weight loss when they produce the profit maximizing quantity. All right. Good questions coming in. You got that dead weight loss? Dead weight loss? Okay, now, before we show you dead weight loss, where's the profit? Where's the profit box? Yeah, there is none. There is no profit. This is the long run. This is a monopolist competitive firm. Firms have entered or left, and now we're end up in the long run. So there's no profit at all. That the total revenue equals the total cost. But there is dead weight loss, right? So understand, dead weight loss is not about the firm, right, being, good or bad. It's about resources, right? So that's the area of dead weight loss. Does that make sense? Yeah. So here's what we found out. You ready? Monopolies, dead weight loss. Monopolist competition, dead weight loss. Oligopolies, dead weight loss, right? The only one that doesn't have dead weight loss in the long run is perfect competition. Perfect competition has no dead weight loss, whereas monopoly competition, monopolies, and oligopolies do. Does that make sense? How do you guys feel about this? Feeling good? I hope so. We are 45 minutes into this. Hopefully this is working for you guys. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going back to some of your questions, see how you guys are feeling about this. Things I have on my list, so you don't have to write a message to me. We're going to talk about margin utility. We're going to talk a little bit about elasticity. I just did dead weight loss. We're knocking some of these out. Monopoly competition. We're going to talk about economies of scale. Someone asked for about that. And of course, hiring workers. The whole idea of MRP, MRC. We should jump on that skill as well. Okay? Okay, really quickly, super fast. Do me a favor. I grade the microeconomics exam. I grade the usually question 1, but I might do question 2 or question 3. And I'm a table leader, which basically means I have to be there 2 days earlier and work with people like D. Meacham and Peter and it's a bunch of my great friends who I love to hang out with. Anyways, I read and I have to read like what you guys put. Leave me a note, man. Like hey, Mr. Clifford, like hey, it was, you rock or something like that. That'd be awesome. It'd be cool to see that you guys watch these videos and give that shout out back to me. Real quick, if you're doing hand turkeys and that's all you don't understand the graphs, don't draw a hand turkey and be like, this is what I learned from you. And that kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. So hopefully this helped you learn. So, if you like the show and this stuff is helping you, please leave a message for me on the free response. Is that cool? I hope so, right? Don't do the message instead of doing the free response. That would be probably pretty bad as well. All right, we are rocking. There are so many of you guys. Actually, I think we're bigger than the macro review session. I got factor markets. For the people who are leaving message real quick on the chat, the live chat. I am not looking at the live chat right now. I am looking on Twitter for your questions because this is a faster, easier, better way for me to access your questions. So here we go. Somebody asked about the labor market. We pounded out perfect competition. We've got monopoly. We've got monopoly competition right now. Please draw a market and a firm hiring workers. So draw the resource market, firm and a market hiring workers with the MRP, MRC for that firm. Okay, go ahead. Good news is we have side-by-side graphs again, right? So same thing we did a few moments ago, side-by-side graph. We also have a market graph, which makes sense, and a firm graph. And I think that's what messes kids up. I think kids see this and they go, oh, I know that one. That's the horizontal demand equals marginal revenue and all that other good stuff, right? But it's not, right? This is the idea of firms hiring workers. So we got to make sure we're talking about wage. So instead of price up there, we've got wage. And we've got quantity of workers, we've got wage. We've got downward sloping demand and upward sloping supply of labor. So nothing's changed in the market graph. Just change who's doing the buying and the selling. Businesses are demanding workers and individuals are supplying their labor. And of course you get an equilibrium. Here's your wage and then here is your quantity. That one you got. What does the firm look like though, right? What's the firm graph look like? Got it? Okay. First, you got to dot over. Ba, 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 ba. Yes. And then most of you guys understand there's a wage here. Yes. You're so far so good. You got a horizontal, ugly. You got a horizontal line, whoop, which is right there. That's where we got to stop. Who is that? That's not Mr. Darp, right? That's Senior Merck, right? This is the supply curve, which equals the MRC. That's the MRC. Again, this makes sense. These aren't price takers. This is a wage taker. So supply and demand is set for fast food cooks. This is the wage for an individual firm that wants to hire these workers. If you want to supply your labor, you got to work for that wage. Let's just say it's $10. It's a $10 wage. You've got to work for $10. If you walk into a place and say, listen, you got to hire me for $20, they're not going to hire you, right? Because they can hire anybody else they want at $10. So this is the supply of labor. Each worker costs the firm another $10. Another worker costs $10. Another worker costs $10 over and over again. Now, what's the next line? Well, if you drew a marginal cost, that would be weird because marginal cost curves are the same as supply curves. We can't have two supply curves. We've got a different curve. We've got the demand. The demand is downward sloping. If you want to draw the hook, you can't. You don't need to. But demand is equal to the MRP. This is the revenue generated by these workers, the additional revenue. First worker generates a lot of revenue. Next worker even more and more because of specialization. But eventually each worker generates less revenue. And so we got to put a downward sloping demand curve. Of course, you hire where the MRP, right, hits the MRC. Now here's the good news. That's it. Seriously, that's it. That's the graph. You're not going to be asked to label boxes of profit. I mean, there's a way of finding some things that they've never asked before, but there's no like shade in the box of profit. There's no ATC. There's no average variable cost. And there's no short run, long run, right? I mean, potentially they could ask that question, but they never have. This is not about firms entering and leaving. That's not what's going on here. This is the graph that you have to know. But why people have a hard time with this is because this unit usually goes so fast. It's one graph, and it doesn't have the other curves we've seen, like marginal cost and ATC. So when you look at this, you're like, it looks different. Yeah, but that's it. Like, draw that graph. That's the key graph, a market and a firm hiring workers. How do you guys feel about that? Does it make sense? Does it feel good? Was that enough? Of course, this graph can change if there's a change in the market. So if, for example, the supply goes up. In fact, let's do that real quick. Let's assume, so under your graph, what will happen to the wage? What will happen to the quantity for the market and for the firm? So kind of like we did before, if there's an increase in the supply of workers. So now, whatever this is, fast food cooks, there's an increase in the supply of workers. A bunch of kids drop out of college, and there are now a huge supply of people who can work at fast food restaurants. What happens to the wage? Up or down in the market? Quantity up or down in the market? You got it? Well, here we go. Supply shifts to the right. Boom. Supply to the right. Graph says wage goes down, quantity goes up. Wage down, quantity up. Makes sense. Great. And then this firm has to take, that new wage, right? Because they're a wage taker. So dot dot over here, this new wage we'll call wage 1. You see that? Ugly. Wage 1. That's the new supply equals the marginal resource cost. We're kind of running out of room here. And then look at the graph right here. Boom, 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 boom. They're going to hire more workers. Let's call that quantity 2. So the wage goes down and the quantity of workers is going to go up, right? That's what this graph says, which totally makes sense. Again, microeconomics is a bunch of graphs that just kind of make sense. I mean, this makes sense. When the wage falls, these firms now can hire workers at a lower wage. These workers right here, right? Those workers that they couldn't hire before because their MRP wasn't high enough are now able to be hired. Like now I'll hire you. Before you only brought in like $5 to my company, but now the wage is lower, I can hire you now, right? So the quantity would go up. That's the concept, all right? Does it make sense? Hope so. Like that's it. That's the kind of questions they're gonna ask you. There's another concept in Unit 5 called the least cost rule. Again, when we talk about details, that's a detailed question. Like you're gonna see one multiple choice, maybe a piece of a response on the least cost rule. It's kind of an easy concept. Can I show it to you? You guys wanna see it? It's just an equation and an idea. The idea is when you're looking to decide to use different resources, let's say, labor and capital, what you got to do is you have to do some calculations. All right. What you do is you calculate the additional product, marginal product, which is the additional output, like how much additional output do you get from another worker, also L for labor, divided by the price of that labor. So if I want to know how valuable a worker is, right, I want to know how much stuff do they make for my company, divided by the price, in this case, the wage of that worker. That tells me the stuff you're making per dollar I spend on you, right? And what you do is you compare that to the marginal product output of capital divided by the price of capital. All right, what does this mean? Well, you compare that number, let's say it's 10, right? So you get this calculation as 10, you compare that to this one, and you find out this one's 20, right? The additional output from another capital, right? Like another tool or factory, or not factory, but another, robot or whatever, divided by the price of that robot gives me a higher number. So let's say this is 10, let's say this is 50, I'm making up numbers here. Which one do you want? Well, I want more of the robots because they give me more output per dollar I spend on them. So if this one's higher, you keep doing this. If this one's higher, you keep doing this. And when they equal, then you've hired the right quantity and at the least possible cost. Now, it's the same idea of like MR equals MC. You're just using marginal analysis. But the reason why this price comes in here is because it puts it in like terms. So if I just looked at the marginal, if you didn't have this price, right, and you look at the additional output for workers and the additional output for computers, that doesn't make any sense because what if computers cost 50 times more than the workers, right? You're adjusting. So this, what it does, it adjusts for that whole price issue. So you end up with the additional output per dollar spent. Does it make sense? What the AP test will do, and it'll be on a multiple choice usually, they'll give you numbers, right? And they'll say, the marginal product of the worker is 10, I'm making up numbers, and the price of the worker is 5, right? And they'll say the marginal product of the capital or the robots, whatever this is 50, right? And the price is 10, right? Even though the capital costs more, right? You definitely want more of the capital because you're getting more output per dollar spent, right? And this one, you're only getting 2 output per dollar spent. And this one, you're getting 5 output per dollar spent. So you'd want to buy more of the capital or more of the robots. Now, really quickly, this is a detail. This is the detail stuff. You got to know the key graphs. This is good for like a multiple choice question, maybe a little tiny piece of it for response. But don't spend all your day and all your time reviewing the little detail stuff, especially if you're just trying to get a 3. If you're a macro student and your teacher spent like 2 seconds talking about microeconomics and all you've been doing is watching my videos, you want to practice the graphs, practice multiple choice questions, but don't freak out about the little tiny details that you might not know. Does it make sense? I hope so, guys. All right, so I'm back to the list of things that we need to cover real quick. You know what? That thing I just showed you, let's talk about margin utility. Watch this. The concept I just showed you with marginal product called the least cost rule is just like the utility maximizing rule, all right? So if we look at the margin utility of some product A, right? So the satisfaction you get from additional units of some sort of product A, and you divide that by the price of that that product. So again, I'm not analyzing workers here. I'm analyzing the joy and the happiness you get from buying stuff, right? Marginal utility. What's the additional satisfaction of a banana divided by the price of that banana? And you compare that to the additional satisfaction of some other product divided by the price of that product, right? So what's the additional satisfaction of banana divided by the price of banana? What's the additional satisfaction of peanut butter divided by the price of peanut butter? And what that does is, same thing. If you get more satisfaction per dollar spent on this, then do more of that one, right? And if you get more on this one, then do more of that one. And eventually, when they equal, you've got the right combination of this. This is called the utility maximizing rule. And they have questions. The questions they ask, like the equation sucks. Like that's stupid looking. The concept makes sense though. What they usually do is they give you two different goods, good A and good B, and they give you the additional satisfaction for each one for this individual. And they say, okay, they ask you to calculate what's the margin utility. They'll ask you to calculate, what's the right combination that maximizes their total utility. So you just calculate the utility per dollar spent. Again, detail, tiny little detail. It might be a free response, but it's not guaranteed a free response like either monopoly or perfect competition is. Does it make sense? All right, I'm going back to Twitter. I covered margin utility, I hope. We covered MRP and hiring workers. We did not talk about the calculations for MRP, like how to calculate MRP, but we can come back to that if you want. I'm going back to your questions here, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. For those people who just walked in and are watching this right now, keep in mind, I am not reading your chat, live chat stuff. I'm reading only Twitter because the live chat just moves by way too fast. Yep. These are great questions. Someone's asking about taxes on a negative externality, deadweight loss. All right, you guys are asking great questions. I really appreciate you guys. I mean, you're just watching me looking at a screen. I guess this is maybe more enjoyable if I do this. You don't see me doing it, but yeah. So, I just covered labor market for Christiana. Perfect competition graph. We did that one. I think you guys are asking some questions of stuff that I already covered before. Market failures. That's what we're going to jump on. If you're coming in now, I talked about per unit tax and subsidies earlier, so take a look at those. Right now, let's go ahead and switch over to externalities. Go ahead and draw on your graph a negative externality. A negative externality shows you there's additional costs on some other individual. So draw a negative externality, label two quantities, the quantity free market and the quantity socially optimal. Quantity free market, quantity socially optimal. Where are those paper towels? Okay, so really quickly, and I'm not, again, being a jerk, but if you're not drawing these graphs, if you're just watching me draw the graphs, it's every year there's a kid who does it. It's just not helpful. You just got to try on your own because you'll be fine. It's hard to remember all the different labeling. So negative externality, quantity free market, quantity socially optimal. Draw the graph just like today's the AP test. What would you actually draw, okay? All right. So here's the trick. There are two cost curves. Two cost curves. If you remember that, you're going to be just fine. All right. Marginal social cost and marginal private cost. All right. Let's take a step back. Negative externality. Concept's easy. There's additional costs on other people. Okay, that makes sense. That's not a hard concept to understand. Pollution, cigarettes, these are all things that have costs on other people. Okay, that concept's not hard, but the graph gets tricky because there's a lot of details, right? We've got supply and demand. We've got a demand curve, which is the marginal social benefit. We have a supply curve, which is equal to the marginal private cost. This is the normal marginal cost we've been analyzing through the entire course. You get a quantity. That quantity is what the free market produces. I'm going to put QFM for that, and I'll do price FM. That's the supply and demand graph we've been drawing the entire year. Boom, that's it. but it's wrong. That quantity's in the wrong spot. It's a market failure. The free market messed up, is producing the wrong amount. So there's a second cost curve, not a second supply curve. There's a second cost curve, and it's right up here. This is the marginal social cost. It includes all the normal private costs, it includes those, and all the additional costs on other people, like the costs that other people have to deal with cigarettes, right? And the smoky, disgusting smell of cigarettes. This is not an arrow either. Don't draw a shift. I'm not saying that this curve shifted. I'm saying there's two cost curves. One, if firms ignore the externality. A second one, if those firms factored in that externality, but they don't. The free market doesn't factor that stuff in. That right there is the quantity socially optimal. Ha-ha! Quantity socially optimal is right here. Right? That price up there is the price socially optimal. So, right now, shade in the deadweight loss. The deadweight loss is somewhere on there. Okay? Go for it. Not there. If you're memorizing triangles, no. I'll give you a trick. If you saw my other video, you saw this. Trick to deadweight loss. Find socially optimal. Always. For monopolies too. Find socially optimal. It always points to socially optimal like an arrow. Right? So find socially optimal, and then deadweight loss will point to it. Right? So think like that as an arrow. Boop! Going to deadweight loss. And the reason why that is because for every single one of the units, the marginal social cost is greater than the benefit. Cost better than benefit. Cost greater than benefit. We should never have produced QF units. That's the wrong quantity. We should have stopped here at QSO. That's socially optimal. New question. You ready for this? Here we go. Let's go back to taxes. We did this earlier. Let's say there was a per unit tax on this market. A per unit tax that shifted the marginal private cost to the marginal social cost. Okay? So assume there's a tax. Now, what kind of tax would it be? Yeah? Lump sum tax? No. Lump sum tax doesn't affect quantity. This would have to be a per unit tax. Per unit tax, right? By the amount of the externality, shifts this curve, becomes that curve. Where would the deadweight loss be? Right? If there is a per unit tax, where would the deadweight loss end up being? Do you know? Well, it's tricky because there would be none, right? There would be no deadweight loss. If this curve disappeared and now this marginal social cost equaled the marginal private cost, then there wouldn't be any deadweight loss because we would produce the quantity socially optimal. So there is none, right? The answer is there'd be no deadweight loss at all. We'd be producing the quantity socially optimal. Ugly graph, I know, but you get the idea. So in this case, what we're trying to say is negative externalities, when you tax them, you're solving the problem. Earlier when we did taxes, if you're taxing something you're not supposed to tax, you create deadweight loss, right? So let's say, and really quickly, I'll use the same graph because again, let's see if you understand what I'm talking about. Instead of assuming that this was a negative externality at all, let's assume that this was the quantity socially optimal. So society wanted where supply equals demand originally. That's what society actually wanted, right? Quantity socially optimal is right there. If you put a tax on it, whoop, now where's deadweight loss? Well, now we're creating it, right? Because we're moving away from socially optimal. And we're over here with the quantity with the tax. So where's deadweight loss? Well, it points like an arrow, always to socially optimal. There's socially optimal, right? And of course, deadweight loss, bam, looks just like this. It points like an arrow here. So again, this is if there's a tax on something we shouldn't tax and there's no externality, then you're creating deadweight loss. You're making us produce less than socially optimal. But a negative externality usually produces more output than the socially optimal, so you're supposed to and you should and you could tax it. Does that make any sense at all? I don't know, because I'm literally by myself in my studio talking alone. I mean, think of how weird that is. I mean, you're like watching like thousands of miles away and listening to some random guy who you don't know who makes YouTube videos. Pretty weird. Okay, so I hope you're getting it. I mean, remember, in the very beginning, there were several people on Twitter who were like freaking out, and they're like, I don't get this stuff. It doesn't make any sense. It's tricky. There's a lot of graphs. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I covered that. Yeah, Gabby Gomez got you on that one, the profit maximizing rule for combining resources. For combining resources, yeah. Yes, I promise I will go over elasticity. You know what I'm not going to do, though? I am not going to do a game theory matrix. So forgive me. I'm not going to because I made a bunch of videos that cover it. One. Two, it's hard to visually show them. I can draw it on here and go through the whole process, but I think it's just better with one of the videos I made. It's really a skill. Either you can or you can't do it. I will tell you this though. When it comes to game theory, right, you have to be able to do three things. Read the chart. Like if they say this person price is low and this person price is high, where's the profit? So be able to do that. And then be able to find what's called dominant strategy, right? So look on the actual chart, calculate or take a look at the dominant strategy and who has it. And then you have to be able to find something called Nash equilibrium. Again, I've made several videos talking about this concept, and my Unit 4 summary video goes into a bunch of detail as well. In fact, there's a good time to mention it. We're already over an hour into this. If everything I've shared with you, if you got every graph right, if you got all the things I asked you on that monopoly graph that you had to talk out loud for, if you got those all right, stop watching this video. Obviously, I would love your views, but stop. This is not the most effective way for you to learn. If you're getting it and you're up and running, the most effective way for you to learn is to do multiple choice questions. If you're thinking like, oh, I wish you asked game theory question, go do a game theory question. That's way more effective than me just going over game theory questions and giving you answers. You see if you get it on the test. So if your teacher gave you a full practice test, try one of those, try a few pieces at a time, a few questions at a time. If you have the ultimate review packet, you have 2 full micro exam questions, try those as well. By the way, if you did get the packet, thank you so much. I'm actually leaving the classroom, if you didn't hear about this, to do econ videos full time. So please subscribe and please watch. But this is my passion and I love doing it. And that ultimate review packet helps me to continue to do it. So thank you, first of all, for that. And for watching right now. I hope I'm helping you guys get ready for this test. And I really hope you get college credit. All right, so back into this. Here we go. Man, there's a ton of you guys watching. This is great. I'm going back to Twitter. For those of you walking in here, what's going on with Twitter? Well, I'm using Twitter, not your chat, to answer your questions. Stop picking your hair. Eric Smith says, stop picking your hair. It's fine. I'm sorry, picking your hair? Yeah, I'm sorry, but thank you. Appreciate that, Eric. I'm going to do economies of scale, I promise you. Kate, I just covered those externalities on the graph. And we did excise taxes earlier, Kate. Take a look at the video. Watch the whole thing now and then go back and watch it. Okay, a lot of people are asking me about monopsonies. I can go over monopsony, right? In fact, I will. And I'm going to go fast, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. And the reason why is because the AP test doesn't focus on it too much. And second reason, it's just really easy. It's a really easy concept. A monopsony is a monopoly for labor, okay? That's what it is, a monopoly for labor. I don't want to cover this, but you're telling me, like 18 people telling me to do this, so I'm going to do it. We already know a market graph for labor. There is a supply and a demand for labor. Okay, nothing weird about that, right? But what is a little different, by the way, this demand is the MRP, right? The revenue generated by these workers. Since this is the only firm that's doing any of the hiring, right? They have something special. They can hire workers at a really low wage. If they hire someone at a really low wage, right? They can hire somebody who's willing to work. One worker is willing to work for that really low wage. Let's say $1 an hour, right? But to hire another worker, they got to increase the wage. Right? I want to hire another worker. I got to increase the wage. They're not wage takers, right? They're not like before in perfect competition where they just take a wage. They have to increase the wage. So they increase the wage of the second worker up to $2 an hour. So the marginal resource cost doesn't equal, right? Marginal resource cost doesn't equal the supply. It's actually greater than the supply. It looks like this. So we've got MRP, MRC. It's like an inverted monopoly graph. So a monopoly graph looks like this, right? This one is the flipped version of that. And just follow the rules. How many workers should they hire? Like, how would you figure out where they hire? Well, you hire where MRP equals the MRC. So that's how many workers you hire, right? So that makes sense. That's the quantity of workers. Okay, I got you. I would always hire as long as the additional revenue they generate is, above the additional cost. So the revenue is above the cost. Revenue above the cost. Here, they equal. I would never hire any workers out here because they cost more than their revenue. Okay, I'm with you. What wage do you charge? Well, you don't, or what wage do you pay? You don't pay them up there. You pay them what they're willing to work for, which is down here. Okay, so the wage is right down here for a monopsony. This is a monopoly for labor. So really, it's like a monopoly graph. It's just flipped. So if you were to flip this around, it will look like a monopoly graph. In fact, let me show you what I'm talking about. Take a look. Watch this. I'll get that other monopoly we had done earlier. Right? Before, there was a downward sloping demand and a marginal revenue less than it. Now we have an upward sloping supply and a marginal resource cost that's above it. Right? And then last time we had a marginal cost that went up, and now we have a marginal revenue product that goes down. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. If not, then that's okay, because it's not that big on the test. If they ask it, everyone's going to be surprised. Everyone's going to be like, whoa, but we did not spend a lot of time on it. And if they did ask it, which they did, I think, in 2014 in the Form V test, that's the question they asked. They basically gave the graph and said, where's the wage? And you go, well, MRP equals MRC. You knew that rule anyways. And the quantity was MRP equals MRC, and the wage, that's it. So basically, that's the skill you have to do. They've yet to ask a question, I think, where you have to draw it. So they've never had draw this graph. It's just not that important of a graph. Okay. Emily Green, I'm going to give you a shout out because she said, all these people are asking me for stuff. I want this. I want this. Emily Green said, hey, Mr. Clifford, you rock. I'm so thankful for you. Emily, I'm thankful for you. Hit that. You rock. Seriously. And I'm thankful for the rest of you as well. I know you guys are thankful, but she's the one who said it. These are good questions. Good questions. Good questions. These are all. So some people are asking me to go over quotas. I made a quota video. It's the one where I'm dressed like a Jedi. I will not go over the prisoner's dilemma. Sorry, Emily Green. I did Samuel Harshbarger, the lump sum per unit I did earlier. So again, some of you guys are coming in now. You're asking for questions. Okay, I think it's time. We're going to do... Was it? Sorry. Some other people are saying pretty funny things. Like not appropriate, but super funny things. I can't read that one to you. Anyway, so let me go to what you guys are talking about right now. I'm going to do a shout out to the first person that sends me something here. Samuel, that's a good question. Where's the deadweight loss for a monopsony? It's not there for our purposes. They are not producing what society want, or what we should have. So take a look. He asked a good question. Like deadweight loss, is that triangle? No, but the concept is this. This is the quantity for perfect competition, and this is the wage, right? So what does that mean? It means that the monopsony hires fewer workers and pays them a lower wage, right? So a monopoly charges a higher price and produces less output. A monopsony hires less workers and pays them a lower wage. So you wouldn't need to know deadweight loss concept, but what you need to know is this idea of the marginal, the idea that their monopsony is not hiring the workers that it should. All right, good question, Samuel. Well done, buddy. All right. Yep. Still no one had said, hey, a shout out, give me a shout out. Thank you so much. You're probably the reason I will have learned so much. You're welcome. Hey, Tom Miller, you are very welcome as well. All right. Constant cost supply curve, I will do that. That is one of the things I want to do on my list. Bill, is it Beth Hauser? He loves you. That's your teacher, Hugh. Real quick, by the way, and I listen. I know you don't owe me anything. I'm glad this is a mutual beneficial transaction. I like making videos, and you like watching them, and you want to learn economics, and I want to help you. But you could do me a favor. Do me a favor. Tell your teachers. I'm planning next year on doing like all of March. I'm going to do like a tour. Like I'm going to go around the United States, and I'm going to go from like school to school and work with teachers and work with students. Teachers in the morning and students. So do me a favor. Tell your teacher, right? Tell your teacher, like, hey, did you hear Mr. Clifford's actually going to start touring? Because I only have so many days I can have, and so it would be cool. People say, okay, I have these 100 students with this school and this school. We want you to come to this school, and I'll come to your school and work with you guys. I mean, not you because you're done with the class, but tell your teacher about this because I'm looking forward to actually meeting and working with some of you guys. So cool. All right, here we go. Discrimination would be a good question for sure. Yeah. All right. You guys are saying such nice things now. Now that I mentioned that you guys weren't saying nice things, you guys are all saying wonderful things. I appreciate it. Sorry. Okay, I got to get off this thing. I'm going to give a shout out to Melissa Bliss Fullbaxter. Hey, she says, I love you so much for this. I love you so much, Melissa. You guys rock. Seriously, you guys can do this. Those of you guys who are freaked out, just take a deep breath. You can do this. Let's jump on the hardest concept, probably in econ, elasticity. Conceptually easy. Some calculations mess people up, but don't freak out. I think you'll be fine. So let's do it. I think the best way to show this to you is if I jump into a PowerPoint, and it's not the most ideal situation, watch me do a PowerPoint, but I think it's the best way to show you a concept of elasticity in general. Is that cool? I hope so, because I'm doing it anyways. So the best way I think I can to show you this concept of elasticity and the elasticity of demand coefficient. In fact, I'll show you the whole idea of elasticity to start off with. So here we go. Yeah, transition. Bam. We're going to transition to my computer screen. And here we go. I don't know where I got this this PowerPoint that shows this little cartoon, but it's a good point. Like inelastic demand, like what is that conceptually? Inelastic demand is the idea that people, let me make sure I can see you guys. Okay, we can. Inelastic demand is the idea that when the price goes up, right, people still buy it. Not a hard concept, right? The law of demand says when the price goes up, people buy less. But how much less? Like they buy 50% less. They buy it 100%. Like they stop buying it altogether. If the price goes up 1%, do people stop and buy none of it? Like is that what's going on? Well, that's the idea of inelastic demand. Inelastic demand, usually think of it like a steep demand curve. So there's a big change in the price that leads to a small change in quantity. So the reason why this is this way, I'm skipping through a couple things. The reason why is because there's few substitutes and they're necessities. You need to buy this stuff. Like milk, at least in my household, the price goes up, we still buy, a good amount. Like price goes up, we buy a little less, but just a little bit less, not a whole lot less. So inelastic demand. The concept you got to watch out for is right there, the elasticity of demand coefficient. It's the percent change in quantity divided by the percent change in price. There's other ways to do this. Something called the midpoint formula. I don't even teach it to my students because, it's just not a huge concept for our test, for our purposes. There's elastic demand, which is the opposite. Like, so look at this picture. A big change or a change in the price leads to a huge change in quantity, right? People go, price goes up. People are like, I'm not going to buy it at all. So we end up with a flat demand curve, which is over there. There's your graph, where price goes up a little bit, people buy a whole lot less. So you see on the graph, it says 5% up, quantity goes 15% down. So that again, there's a reason. The reason is because there's the general reasons are there's many substitutes and they're luxuries, and there's elasticity coefficient that's greater than 1. Now that coefficient is what people mess up on. Don't. Here's an example. This will make sense. Take a deep breath. Seriously. All right. First question. Is this demand curve elastic or inelastic? Now before you jump on it, keep in mind it depends. Where are you on the graph, right? For example, if we're down here, right? Let's say the price and quantity is right there, and the price falls 50%. And you can see it looks like it has fallen 50%. And the quantity goes up, obviously not by 50%. It's only going to go up, in this case, by, say, 10%. So what's the elasticity of demand coefficient? Well, it is it's a negative number at first. Notice for demand, it's always a negative number. The change in quantity was 10% or 0.1. And the change in price was 0.5, right? So this would show you that the elasticity demand coefficient is the change in price, right, is greater than the change in quantity. So that means it's more inelastic demand. So why does that matter? Look at the idea. Price fell a whole lot. It fell 50%, but quantity went up just a little bit percentage-wise, right? So that means its demand is inelastic. So that demand curve, even though its slope isn't changed, right, it shows it's more inelastic. When the demand or when the price is really low, the demand for products have a tendency to have more inelastic demand, which makes sense. Up here, let's do the same thing. Don't get lost. Let's say the price and quantity is here. Let's say price goes down 10%, which visually looks about 10%. quantity goes up by a whole lot, right? Because we're talking about percent change. It looks like it doubled, right? So let's say price goes up by 50%, right? So price goes down 10%, quantity goes up 50%. A big change in quantity, right? In this case, 50% change in quantity. So the elasticity to demand coefficient would be 0.5, right, over 0.1, or it's better yet, negative 0.5 or 0.5 over negative 0.1, which basically what I'm trying to show you is, number one, this is always a negative number, right, first for demand. And number two, a big change in quantity from a small change in price means it's more elastic. Now that equation, again, it seems really complicated, but it isn't. The idea is not like a crazily hard, disgusting, horrible concept. It's just like, okay, it kind of makes sense, except you have an equation that goes with it. Now, of all the equations you have to learn, this is one that you have to feel comfortable with. Percent change in quantity divided by the percent change in price. And the reason why you need comfort with this is because, one, they can ask it for demand, but they can ask it for demand, right? And it's always a negative number, right? They can also ask it for supply. So it's called elasticity of elasticity of supply coefficient, and it would be the percent change in quantity supplied divided by the percent change in price. So for demand or supply, they can ask that same darn equation, and they can just show you a graph, and you have to calculate the quantity, right? The percent change in the quantity. Notice it's not just the quantity. It didn't just go up by 5, right? It goes up by 5%. So make sure you can do a percent change. And that's always easy. For example, I mean, let's just come up with one. Let's say, the quantity was at 8, and it goes to 10. I mean, let's be honest. This is easy math. So if we're 8 and we go to 10, that's an increase of how much? I'll say it again. Have you ever done percent change before? Don't forget, I'm not going to give you an equation, but we go from 8 to 10, right? Is that what? Is that 100% increase? Is that 2% increase? What is the percent change? Well, to do this, it's an increase of 2, right? But it's just not the percent. It goes up to 2. 2 is what percent of 8? Well, it's 1/4. So it's 25%. That's an increase of 25%. Okay. Don't say it's 20%, right? So from here went up by 2 compared to the original number. So that's an increase of 25%. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, not the end of the world. This is not the most important concept in the test. But there's demand supply. There's also another one called cross price. So what I'm doing is I'm listing the different elasticity of demand coefficients or elasticity coefficients you might have to calculate. Cross price is super easy. I mean, it seems complicated, but it's not. It's the same equation. Percent change in quantity divided by percent change in price. In fact, I'm going to reposition this equation so we can see. I'm just redrawing it over again. Percent change in quantity divided by percent change in price. So for the demand, percent change in price, how does it change the quantity demanded? For supply, percent change in price, how does that change the percent change in the quantity supplied? Okay. For cross price, the percent change in product A, how does it affect the quantity demanded of a different product B? Okay, that makes sense. And it tells you if two things are substitutes or complements. So for example, if the price goes up for A, so I'm doing a positive number, and that leads the quantity for the other one to go up, another positive number, and the number doesn't matter. So 10% increase and a 30% increase. The numbers don't matter. It's the sign that matters if it's positive or negative. So if people buy more of A, the price goes up for product A, right? So it's more expensive to buy product A, and people go buy the product B instead. These must be substitutes. So for cross price elasticity, here's the rule. Positive are substitutes, negative is complements. The number itself is not asked very often, but you should understand the idea. Just memorize if you're at that stage. Positive substitutes, negative complements for cross price. There's one more. Percent change in quantity, except not percent change in price, but a percent change in, come on, say it out loud, income. All right? So if income goes up or down, how does that affect quantity? Right? And that doesn't tell you, and this is, by the way, called income elasticity. That doesn't tell you, so there's 4. In fact, I'll number them because I'm a nice guy. 2, 3, and 4. Here's your 4 types of elasticities. Demand, supply, cross price, and price, really? Price, and income elasticity, right? So income elasticity, you already know that concept, man. You got this, right? If income goes up and people buy more of it, that means it's a positive number. That means it's a normal good, right? Normal good. Remember normal good? Income goes up, people buy more. If income goes up and people buy less of it, that's a negative number. A negative number must mean it's a inferior good. Yep. All right, so I got some shorthand here, but I think you get the idea. So here's the thing. Know the equation. To be honest, that's to get a 4 or 5. Knowing the concept of elasticity, that's to get like a 2 or 3. Being able to do, so doing the calculation is like the highest level of this concept. Understanding positive and negative, that's like getting a 4. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's not that, even if you don't know how to do that equation, but you understand the idea what a negative number means, that's good. Like, for example, if you saw negative, 0.7, right? Cross price elasticity, negative 0.7. Never mind the 0.7, but what's a negative? Negative means they're complements, right? So it might say product X and product Y. Product X has a negative cross price elasticity. You know X and Y are now complements by that negative sign. Does that make sense? I hope it does, guys. That's elasticity. Again, your teacher might have jumped in more details with the midpoint formula. There is a benefit cost analysis you have to make. And with my students at my school, I make a cost benefit analysis where I go, it's not worth our time to spend all this extra time doing tiny calculations when you need to understand big concepts and big ideas. Okay, for the people who have just come in again, let's see how many people are watching this thing, because we're actually winding down a little bit. Do you actually grade the AP free response? I'm going to write no. Avery asked, I really do grade the free responses. It's super fun. People always ask, do you help your students more and give them right answers? No, not at all. One, I don't have my students' names on there, so it doesn't tell me. But also, it's I wouldn't help my students more than somebody else because my students better get it right. Also, like I said, leave me a note. Seriously, say, hey, Mr. Clifford, thanks a lot. You rock, man, or something like that. That would be cool to get a message from you. It actually passes the time because 7 hours a day of grading tests for like 10 days straight is like the worst thing ever. But luckily, the pay is not very good. So that's fine. I do it because I love it and because I get to hang out with some pretty fun people. If your teacher hasn't done grading, you should invite them to do it. Grant just said, hey, thankful for Mark Cuban. People think I look like Mark Cuban. I don't know if that's true, but there's that thing going around that I do. All right, let's get back into it. All right, we're winding down. Yeah, we're coming up pretty close, maybe 10 more minutes or so. So I'm going back to your questions here. We talked about elasticity. We did labor markets. Luke showed a funny picture on the live stream. And like I said, follow me on Twitter if you didn't already do so. You got some funny pictures of people doing silly things. Thanks for taking my econ grade, Andy. You are very welcome. Give a shout out to people watching from South Brunswick. South Brunswick, where are you guys? Andy, tweet me. Let me know where you guys are, South Brunswick. You guys are funny. You're welcome, Amber. That's cute. Okay, I'm going to jump back into some of this stuff. Elasticity, covered it. Thank you for saving my econ grade. You're very welcome. Elasticity. Heard you have. Somebody asked about secret videos. I do have secret videos. To access the secret videos, you need the Ultimate Review Packet. I have the unit summary videos for Unit 4, 5, and 6. They're really good. And the multiple choice questions, that comes with the Ultimate Review Packet, and a bunch of the practice tests. It's the best way of saying thank you, getting the Ultimate Review Packet. It's a great thing to do when we're done here to jump on that. Let's talk about cost curves really quickly. I think that's a good thing to talk about to wind us down here. We've covered a lot of stuff. I'm going to do this first. Economies of scale. Not a hard concept. Let's talk about something random. So I'm randomly picking things here. I have a stapler. A stapler. There it is. To staple up my green screen. There's a company that produces these, right? I don't know what the company's name is, Armoro, but they produce these, right? Now, if I asked you to produce this thing, and I said, I want you to make exactly one like this, it would probably cost you thousands of dollars to just make one, right? You need the machines to bend the metal and everything else to get this thing all set up. It would cost you a whole lot of money to make one, but they sell these for like what, $20, $15? If it costs so much to make one, why are they so cheap? Economies of scale. They're producing these things in mass. They're using mass production techniques. They've got machines that are doing the pressing. They have other machines putting things together so fast and so quick that the average cost in the long run is super low. That's economy of scale. Getting bigger is cheaper. So there's a graph that goes along with economies of scale. It's never really asked on the AP test, but it shows you the long run average total cost. As you produce more stuff, the long run average total cost falls, then it levels off, and then it goes back up. Long run average total cost. It separates the graph into 3 different parts. Gosh, this graph is ugly, but I think you get the idea. Again, the first one is called economies of scale. This is the idea that as they're producing more output, their long run average total cost is falling, right? They're mass producing stuff. Then the middle part is called constant returns to scale, means their costs aren't really falling. And then over here, this is called diseconomies of scale, right? Diseconomies of scale. Forgive the shorthand, don't do this on the AP test. But basically, if you're producing 1 billion of these, staplers a day, your average cost will start going back up because it's just, hard to organize that many resources. The concept on the test, you need to understand that economies of scale is a barrier to entry, right? The reason why you can't compete with Nike is not because you couldn't produce one shoe. It's because you couldn't mass produce shoes without some very high startup costs, right? So economies of scale is great. Your average costs fall. Your total costs are astronomical. But if you're producing a lot of output, your average costs start to fall because you can use mass production. And you can't compete. And, sometimes barriers are high because the startup costs are so high to buy those initial machines. That's, I think, enough of economies of scale. I made a video about it as well, but that's the idea. We've covered almost everything on my list. Let's make sure we know the key skills that you have to do. Let me show you a few things here. All right. So I'm going back to Twitter really quickly. So we can all breathe a little bit. Keep in mind that that passing this AP test, you got to get a 57%, right? So if you're like, oh man, I don't know this, 57% is what you need. So you know half of this. I promise you know half of this stuff. Show you know it, right? That's the idea. All right. The one thing I'm going to do again is I'm going to do some calculations with cost curves. Make sure we get this. I will give Parsa a shout out for being the econ king. Live stream. Why do you guys? Okay, I am probably, maybe this is green behind me, or maybe because I'm sweating, but I am the least photogenic person when you guys take pictures of me. It's amazing. Are you kidding? Look at that. Are you kidding me? Yeah, thanks, Jordan. I appreciate that. Good catch, buddy. Thank you. I mean, I can't blame you. It's my face. From Trinidad, shout out to you from Trinidad. I'm glad you're watching my videos. Alex, I love your videos too. That's a third person for price discrimination. If another person asks, I'll do it. Hey, Dominican Republic. Hey, shout out to you as well. Look at you guys. You guys are taking the test pretty soon. Someone asked me about the Lorenz curve. The Lorenz curve is the banana graph. It shows a distribution of income. They've never asked it on an AP test as its own standalone free response question, but they have done it on a multiple choice. I don't teach my students and spend a lot of time on it, but it's not that big of a deal. At least it hasn't been. I could see it in future AP tests, but they just a lot of times what they do, when they did game theory for the first time, in 2007, they basically ran up to it. So they'd ask a bunch of questions in multiple choices, and they kind of mentioned, hey, we're going to start doing this, and then they did it. So I have heard in the past, watch out for the Lorenz curve, the concept, but it's not a graph you should be drawing at this point. And if it was a graph you should draw, it's it's not like a graph that you really shift around much. It's just like a graph that you understand, the idea, the relationship between it. I'm not going to draw it, but it's the percent of families and the percent of income. And it shows you actual distribution of income compared to a perfect equality. So it's not like an average total cost or a marginal revenue where you find a unit to produce and stuff like that. Shout out to Borger. We all love your vids. Borger is a school, Jordan? I think so. All right. She's another one. She said price discrimination. Let's do it. Price discrimination. I'm going to show one cute thing. This is from Audrey. It's really cute. Seriously. So I'm not a big fan of just awkward cuteness, but this is pretty cute. Look at this. Her cat is watching me. Look at the crazy. I'm showing you an image of you watching me. It's like Inception. Okay, price discrimination. It's the best type of discrimination if I'm going to have to pick one, I guess. Price discrimination is when a monopoly charges different prices. It's called a multiple price monopoly. So we've got a quantity, we've got price. Normally a monopoly has a demand and a marginal revenue, but that doesn't happen here. The demand equals the marginal revenue. And here's why. To sell another unit, a monopoly has to lower its price. True. But they don't have to lower the price for everybody. The person who's willing to pay 100 pays 100. The person who's willing to pay 90 pays 90. The person who's willing to pay 80 pays 80. So you don't have to lower the price of the units to the next buyer because you're charging everybody different prices. Now, if you got to this point, you're done. You know how it works. Marginal cost, ATC, they always look the same. Marginal cost goes down and up, shabam. ATC goes down, hits a minimum, goes up, shabam. Now you just follow the rules where MR equals MC. MC, MR, they're going to produce right here. There's a quantity, worst Q ever, for price discrimination. This is a perfectly price discriminating monopoly. I don't think they've alluded to it in questions. They've never asked to draw the graph, but there's the graph. So where's the price? Do you guys see the price? It's right here, right? No, there's multiple prices. I can't label a price. These are all prices they're charging, right? All the way down, there's different prices. So where's the consumer surplus, though? If you know that graph, where's the consumer surplus? Well, there is none. The consumer surplus has all been converted into profit. So the profit now is a bigger area than it would normally be, and all that consumer surplus is becoming profit. Does it make sense? That's the graph for a perfectly price discriminating monopoly. Now, real quick question. Where's the deadweight loss? Okay, find that deadweight loss. Is it that triangle? Where is that deadweight loss? I'm going to whisper because whispering makes it exciting. Dead weight loss. Well, it's not right there because they're producing where the demand equals the marginal cost. So in theory, there would be no deadweight loss, right? They're producing all the quantity that society actually wants. They're just charging people what they're willing to pay. So each person is paying exactly what they're willing to pay, and they're producing the quantity that's actually socially optimal. So it's a weird concept. There's no consumer surplus. There's no deadweight loss. There's just a monopoly making a boatload of profit. Okay? You got it. You wanted it. You got it. That's how it works, right? You demand, I supply. So thank you for that question. You got it. I am going to give a shout out to Ben Pearl and your teacher, Mr. Shapiro. Also, your flannel is super dope and your videos save me big time. Thank you for my dope flannel. I appreciate it. I like that compliment. All right, we got to move on, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to move on. Come on. Your macro froze video. I'm doing micro video. I will give a shout out also to John Ostick. He is the man. You guys out there in Philadelphia, I hope you guys are having a good time. I hope you guys are ready for this test. Also a shout out to Mr. Edwards, AP Econ group message. There you go. Faley? It's a cute name. All right. Last thing. So, like I said, this is good. If you've been enjoying this review, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. But let's be honest, the better way to understand this stuff is just to practice. So you got to do practice questions. I'm going to give you one last thing, and then we are out of here for me. I'm going to give you the quantity and the total cost for some random firm when they're producing. I'm talking about perfect competition. This is a skill. It's one of the 4 key skills I mentioned in the very beginning. How much output to produce, right? So I'm making up a number, making up a question in the top of my head. So the question starts off with they'll ask you, calculate the total cost. They'll give you the total cost, and they'll say calculate the marginal cost, calculate the MR, and all that good stuff. I'm going to give you guys a question. Let me work it out really quick here. 27, 35, 40. Let's do this. All right. 50. 70. So here's what you got to do. They set up and say, here's the quantity for a perfectly competitive firm, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then they give you the total cost, 20, 25, 27 for each unit. These are the total costs, not marginal costs. Then they give you a series of questions. They'll ask questions like, what is the average variable cost? By the way, I did a whole video on the per unit cost curves, right? If you've seen that one, covers all these things in detail. But they'll ask you questions like, how much is the fixed cost? So I'm gonna write some questions off to the side. Fixed cost, how much is the variable cost of, let's say, 2 units? They'll ask you questions like, how much is the average total cost of 5 units? Forgive, I'm kind of running out of room over here to the side. But they say, what's the fixed cost? What's the variable cost of 2 units? Right? What's the average total cost of 5 units? Right? These are all questions they might ask. Okay? All right. So, all right, fixed cost. Let's answer that one first. How much is the fixed cost? Well, I don't have a fixed cost column, but if you produce 0, you still got a total cost of 20. Right? These are all dollars. I don't have dollar signs, but they're all dollars. So the first one, the fixed cost is $20 for all of them. For the first unit, second unit, third unit, fourth unit, fifth unit, they're all $20 because fixed costs are fixed. It doesn't change with the number of units you produced. Variable cost of 2. Well, if I produce 2 units, I know there's a $27 total cost, but 20 is fixed. So the right answer for this one is 7. 7 is the variable cost of producing 2 units. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so how much now is the last one? The average total cost of 5. Average total cost of 5. Well, I'll go down to 5. 5 units cost me $70 total, but average, well, I need the equation, or just understand the idea. How much does each unit cost on average, right? If I produce 5, it costs me 70. How much does each one cost on average? Well, the answer is 14, right? 14 times 5 would be 70. 14 times 5. So 14 is the answer to the average total cost, right? All right, now those are easy calculations for cost curves. Let's go ahead and bring in the most important skill in this case, though, is this, let's give us a price. Assuming the price is 10, right up there, price is 10, how many output should this firm produce to maximize profit, right? That's what the question is. So there's a skill, it's a process you have to go through to get the right answer, okay? See it? All right, I'm not gonna expect you to write all these things down, but let's kind of do it together. And if you wanna practice, you can watch my video that talks about this. We gotta calculate the marginal cost. We're talking about perfect competition here. Marginal cost, right, is 5, right? So 2, then 8, then 15, then 20. You guys with me? Let's check my arithmetic. 5, 2, 8, 15, and 20. Yep, that's right. So that's the marginal cost. Now we got to figure out the marginal revenue. If we knew the marginal revenue, we can figure out how much to produce, right? Because all firms produce where the MR hits MC. So where's the MR? I didn't give an MR. We're in trouble. No, we're not. Perfect competition. The price is equal to the demand. So each unit costs another $10. Another unit, $10. Another unit, $10. Another unit, $10. Not cost, I'm sorry. Another unit, you can get $10. It's the marginal revenue. Another unit I can sell for $10. Another unit, $10. Another unit, $10. The marginal cost goes down and up, like it always does. If you were to plot these things, you'd come up with a horizontal demand curve, right, at 10, and a marginal cost that goes down and up, which that's what they do. All right, would you produce the first unit? Yeah. If I can sell it for 10 and it costs me 5, totally. Would I produce a second unit? Yes. Third unit? Yes. Right? The marginal revenue is 10, the marginal cost is 8, right? So I'm going to produce it. Would I produce the fourth? No. Now the marginal cost is 15 and then only get $10 of revenue. The right answer was 3, right? Now, again, if you're confused or I went too fast, okay, sorry. But I got a bunch of practice questions like that in the Ultimate Review Packet, and I have multiple choice questions as well in that Ultimate Review Packet. So if you had the packet, you can go and watch that summary video where I have like a whole setup of this, and you do it over again. And the Unit 3 summary video for microeconomics. Okay, here we go. Recap. Let's finish this thing off. Okay, we got some of you guys got to go to sleep. Some of you guys are taking the test in like 20 minutes because you're on the other side of the world. First thing, focus on knowing the graphs, right? So it is good to know the concepts and the definitions, economies of scale and fixed costs and per unit lump sum. Those are good things to understand, and you need to know them, but you gotta know the graphs. On the AP test, I see so many questions that are straight up just blank. Somebody's like, I don't know, they leave it blank. I better not see that for you, right? I better not see just a blank, nothing in a sentence goes, hey, thanks, Mr. Clifford. Because take a guess, even if you have no clue. I don't tell a lot of students this, but I'm gonna tell you guys, shh, because no one's listening, no one knows, right? I'm giving you guys tricks of the trade. When we grade this darn AP test, we have to follow certain rules, and we give some really easy points. So if some kid has no idea how to draw a perfect competitive graph, and he has like, it depends on the question, but he goes like this and goes, okay, there's your marginal cost, which not what marginal cost looks like. And he goes, there's your marginal revenue, right? And he goes, okay, you produce where MR equals MC. And this is the graph they have, just that. Obviously, in my classroom, I'd be like, yeah, no credits. But depending on the question and their rubric, I'd have to give this point to this kid. I'd say, all right, you get this point. And I'm okay giving you that point, right? You know, at the very least, MR hits MC. Never leave a graph blank. Most importantly, know the key graphs. I'll say them again. There are perfect competition, product market, side-by-side graphs, right? Perfect competition, side-by-side graphs. No a monopoly, no monopolistic competition, no game theory matrix. There's videos on that. My summary video covers it. No, hiring workers in the perfectly competitive resource market. So side-by-side graphs again, except with MRP, MRC, negative externalities, positive externalities. Those are some of the key graphs. Can draw them right now. Be able to draw that graph. And then there's also some key skills. We said game theory, make sure you find dominant strategy and Nash equilibrium. For hiring workers, like we just did, hiring workers, calculate the MRC, decide how many units to produce. I'm sorry. What we just did was output. So producing output, that's what we just did. So, calculate the marginal cost and ATC. That's hiring, that's producing output. Hiring workers, calculating the MRP, MRC, which I did not do, but I have videos on in the summary videos. And the last one is that utility maximizing stuff, having two different products and maximizing utility. From those things alone, you can do solid points in the free response. And a good, let's say you got 25 out of 30 on the free response, you actually could chill out a little bit on the multiple choice and still be fine getting a 3 or a 4, okay? First of all, I want you guys to know you guys are awesome. I could not have a channel if it wasn't for you. I really couldn't. This wouldn't even exist. I showed the macro people, so I'm going to show you guys as well. I got something special this year with you guys. Thank you so much. This is YouTube. They sent me the silver playlist button, which is right here. It shows you that I got 100 subscribers. This is because of you guys. 100,000 subscribers. This is because of you guys. This happened because I'm able to help teach you and learn economics. Like I said, next year I'm actually leaving the classroom. I'm going to make a lot of fun, interesting videos, kind of, not just about this kind of stuff, not just graphs. You're not going to watch this stuff when you get out of college and maybe out of high school for some of you. But I can tell you this. I'm going to show you some cool stuff about personal finance. I'm going to talk to you guys about politics and economics. And hopefully you'll enjoy the show. And hopefully it wasn't a huge mistake. But I got to live economics. This is my passion. I'm going to do it. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to apply what you guys are learning in economics. And I want you to do the same thing. Apply this stuff for the rest of your life, okay? Thank you so much for watching my videos. It has been a pleasure being your online second teacher, okay? Thanks for watching. Until next time.